All right, everyone, welcome. The date is June 21st, 2022. This is the bi-weekly Cloud Custodian meeting. As usual, we're following the CNCF Code of Conduct, so please be excellent to each other. And please remember that we do record this and post the videos on YouTube for the public to see. I've gone ahead and tossed the URL for the HackMD document here. That's where you find the marked down notes for this document and has the agenda and all the things that we will be discussing today. Kapil is at the FinOps conference in Austin, so the Wi-Fi and audio there isn't conducive to long conversations, so we'll try to do the best that we can with that. And let me just share the notes here, makes it easier for people. And one second. Why did I lose focus? All right, we'll just go with this then. Okay. Introductions. Anyone new that wants to say hello? I recognize most of you already. Anyone want to say hi? It looks like we got everybody. First thing I have for the group is the Cloud Custodian Workshop at Scale. That is the Southern California Linux Expo, I think is what that stands for. It's been around for a while. It's community driven. A lot of cloud folks there. So I'm heading over to LA at the end of July, and I put a link there to the session. Sunny and I are just going to do a 90-minute workshop. So if people have AWS accounts, you can show up. We're going to go over some of our favorite policies, the anatomy of a policy, and go over some best practices. And generally speaking, just hang out at the conference and help people. So if you've got a coworker or you're close there and you want to stop by, Scale is it's very cheap because it's a community run. So I want to say $50, something like that. It's not that expensive compared to most conferences. So if you're interested in that, let me know so I can bring you a Custodian T-shirt. And that's all we have for conferences. Obviously, if you're in Austin, Kapil is in town. If you're at the Open Source Summit or any of that stuff. And that was really the only announcement I have, other than some release information. AJ, I don't know if you just want to give us a status report, or are we opening a bug to look at, or what? Here.
No, I don't think we have a new status. I had published a release to test PyPI last week, and just being ahead, I know some orgs had off on Monday, and just generally hesitant to push a release. My first release to push on a Friday, so just hold until today, and then after the call, if folks are around, we can stick ahead, go through the release checklist, and you all can poke holes in find any steps that I miss along the way.
Awesome. So when are you going to do this? This is 7492, right?
That was merged. So that was merged in the dependencies, the version bump. And I know Pratush is on the call and had so anyone who is trying to until we actually have the official 0917 release, if anyone's trying to do anything with building subprojects, they're all going to depend on this release version, this new release version, which is not yet published. So we're in a bit of a straddly phase.
Okay. Yep. That was something we figured. You said you're gonna push it to PyPy on Tuesday. That's today, right?
That is today. So let's
no real issues found with the release.
Good. That's good.
And AJ, we talked about, you want to do this after?
After
we finish the meeting, we could just stay on, and if anyone wants to hang out and see how we do it, you can just share your screen, and then we'll figure it out. Have a little fun today. So, okay, excellent. All right, moving on. Questions looking for eyeballs. So as I showed last week, we now have GitHub discussions on that will take you to the GitHub discussions area. And we have 3 new questions that I'd like, if you have a chance to take a look. Someone's looking for a TCP periodic examples that they can't seem to find. So there you see Sunny's already started to try to help answer and things like that. So if you want to take a look at those, we would appreciate some eyeballs there. All right, first up, we have one from Shiny, which is 7219.
Yep, and this is regarding lake formation. So there is one use case where lake formation allow any third party in engine to read and filter the data stored in S3, which is associated with lake formation. And you can in that filter you can just put your account ID, and basis on that it will allow or disallow. So you can filter the data, and I think this can be achieved through cross account filter if we implement that filter. And for that, I think we can add lake formation to Cloud Custodian with this filter.
So I didn't know if there's a new PR here, but like there's a lot of interesting cross account and lake formation can mean lots of different things because there's access roles as well. I think the core use case that you had was around S3 buckets, and I think that would make sense as a separate like lake cross account filter on the account resource itself. And where we can underneath the hood go, look at all the S3 buckets that are in the account and cross index to the ones that are lake formation resources. Potentially over time, we could add some of the additional capabilities that are in the lake formation settings. There's quite a few there as far as sharing and EMR access cross account and other things. And I think that'll give us an anchor point to grow into over time. But on your core use case, I think that would probably be the best path forward that we can expand with.
Yeah, so you're asking me to add the filter on the account resource.
Yeah, I was thinking like a lake formation, a lake cross account filter on the account resource would let us address it, because it doesn't feel right to model S3 buckets as a lake formation resource. The service itself doesn't treat those as resources either.
Right.
So like if you look at the tagging API for lake formation,
Yeah.
it doesn't actually look at that. So this is part of the discussion that's already on I think AJ's PR with regards to reformatting it, but just good to capture for the group.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, it did seem like there were layers of it. I started looking into some of this, and it looked like cross account could mean you've got lake formation in one account registering an S3 bucket as a resource, and that S3 bucket lives in another account. Or it could mean you're using EMR, like Kapil said, and that's what I think this external data filtering is. You're using EMR in another account to do the processing, or you're granting access to the catalog for another account. So it's like, there's a lot.
And I think there's even more stuff there as far as like the IAM roles that have access into the lake as well. So there's quite a bit there in those settings. But because it's a global object, it does make sense, I think, to just model it onto like cross account, and we'll have some of the same core primitives that we do from a commonality perspective with the other cross account filters, but the underlying implementation will be quite different because we'll try to use the same high level abstraction over a bunch of different underlying capabilities.
Right. Yeah. Do we have any existing example where we have achieved this kind of thing?
No, we don't. And this one's going to be quite a bit different, I think, than existing cross account, because what we're going to do is take, maybe we do, take that back. Perhaps we do. Maybe cross account on, images. So in this context, for the core use case around making sure there's no S3 buckets there that are from a different account, I'm going to try to get to a quieter place. For the core use case, it would be sort of like grabbing the S3 resource manager, grabbing all the buckets, making sure that grabbing all the lake formation resources, doing the intersection, finding any that are not there. And that would be sort of our first pass at it. And then over time, we would grow into some of the settings capabilities, and as we understand them, to also do checks there as well.
Yep. Sounds good.
All right. Anything else on this one?
Well, that's it from my side.
All right. Awesome. All right. Now we have the list of incoming PRs and things like that. The way this works is if you want to discuss it, either tell me now, or you can just add a little explosion symbol next to it, : boom, and then we'll just go top to bottom. So we just finished shinies. This one here, 7500 config poll rule fix.
Yeah, this is from my team. I can help
Mhm.
talk through this one. Mind if I take presenter screen sharing mode?
Absolutely. There you go.
I hate doing this. I think it's not allowing me to share. I never figured this out. How to go through this?
Sometimes a hard refresh in the browser works for me. But it'll kick you out of the meeting real quick, and then you'll come back in.
No, so it doesn't let me to do it. Well,
If you're on the Mac, you have to go into like settings and
yeah.
give permission and restart the browser.
It's in the security setting. Maybe George, you can just go ahead and open.
Yeah,
well, maybe
we'll just come
is
back
there
to
something
you.
you wanted to show?
Yeah.
I mean, is it something else that George can show, or if you want to show it, then we can come back to it.
I think it's just easier for me to talk through it. Yeah, let me try to come back. Yeah, come back to me.
Okay, we'll go to 7495 and then come back to you. All right, unless 7495 is yours.
No.
CloudFront update distributions needs WebACL ARN.
Oh, that looked like a quicker one. That looked like Harish had the original implementation. It looked like it was looking at the ACL ID, and that was how we needed to pull it in with WebV1. It looks like in WebV2 it needs to look at the ARN. So we made that update. That looked fine. Looked like Kapil, you had merged that in, so that checked out for you too, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't functionally test it, but
Yeah.
I mean, it made sense, and it was just a V1 versus V2 difference that needed to be accounted for. I think after he was doing some internal testing with it.
Cool. I would say that the only other point I have on this one is that this is the only commit that has been merged in since I did the test PyPI release last week. So I would plan to include this also if we were going to do a release today, but that's the only new change.
Sounds good.
Gotcha. Anything else on this one? All right, moving on. 7492. This was just us discussing bumping all the dependencies and things like that, which we already went over. 7465. Support policy interpolation with environment variables.
Yeah, this is a interesting one. It seems useful. I've also seen similar syntax with Terraform, the usage of the TFR _ environment variables. There was some discussion in the PR around, I guess, the utility of it, but the original PR poster did not, their contributor did not want to really discuss it in the meeting, but curious if anyone else had any other use cases for it.
Yeah, I didn't get beyond sounds neat. I mean, looks useful. Having an extra way to provide dynamic values seems cool, but that's as far as I looked.
Yeah, is there anything we can do to make them feel more comfortable about not having it sounds like they don't have the confidence to show up to a meeting and just talk about it. So maybe we can.
Well, I guess like, are there any hard objections to the implementation or the
I don't have an objection. I think it's super useful for a variety of reasons. My only question would be, do we have a non-environment variable way of doing configuration? We had toyed around with doing a vars file per se. We just haven't figured out. We haven't wired it in because it's using the environment variables. It's able to bypass a little bit and goes directly to the variable extraction in the policy. But I think it's a useful capability. It is a change on public interface and overall capability. So I just want to at least make sure that we had it discussed in this meeting, which is my comment on the PR as well. But I think generally speaking, hey, variables good. Keep them out of policies, simpler. But generally this is a good thing. Now, this is distinct from historical context. We have a vars section in our policy file format, which is mostly for YAML anchor reference. That is really not a variable to Custodian because it gets substituted in before via the YAML parse. And this is a separate notion of Custodian actually has some actual variables, and we have some auto variables that we inject. Being able to user extend those per se for additional ones, and that generally seems like a useful capability. The only additional consideration was whether or not we also expose that via a vars file. That doesn't have to be part of this PR. I think that they're independent topics. It's just a question of fleshing it out so that it's addressable additionally beyond just environment variables, being able to pass in a JSON file of variables that are defined. Now in C7N org, this is already extant as a capability. It's just not exposed through the regular Custodian CLI. In C7 org, in the accounts file, you can define variables that get used for policy interpolation.
That was going to be my follow-up question, was how, I mean, I know I've got an open draft PR kind of documenting some of the variable interpolation that we do, because it's a common point of confusion for new folks as they start to add that
It
stuff.
is, and yeah,
Several levels.
100%. Like, yes, the different mechanisms and layers and the auto ones need to be documented, and how to define user ones needs to be documented. And from a capability set perspective, right now, regular C7N org has it through a particular format, and C7N regular CLI does not. And so closing the gap on that to introduce that. The only question then becomes, if we have a vars file in C7N, do we need to also reintroduce that into C7N org to have it not be coupled to the accounts file? But
yeah, and
these are all future
precedence
iterations.
there?
I don't think we're locked in here. This is definitely a change in our public interface, though. So I just want to make sure we had it discussed.
Cool. Yeah, I think the precedence there is interesting too. Like if you define something as an environment variable, and then you run it with C7N org, and you've got the same variable in your setup file, like we just need to make sure that we sort out the precedence there and it's documented and whatnot.
That's a good question. I think the C7N org would interpolate first, so that would probably have precedence. I'm not 100% sure on that, though. It actually requires looking at which one resolves first.
Okay.
All right. Anything left on this one? So I think what I'll do is I'll post a link to this discussion there.
Well,
when the
it's
video is
topic,
up,
though, like as far as what is the correct order of variable interpolation, in open discussion, I would think generally treating environment variables as the least amount. It's an open question because I could see both use cases. Like which one, like if you're stacking variables and you're overriding, does explicit configuration always trump, so to speak? And that would be CLI variables file, I think, in that context. And then in the context of C7N org accounts YAML as well. And then in the context of the default, it would just be the environment variables, or sorry, the lowest layer. So anything on the higher levels would override. So I haven't thought about this very much. I'm just curious. Like, I'm gonna spitball something out there just to draw a person.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's the ordering's not as important as documentation about the ordering. I could see the argument going either way on whether you want your environment variables first. I think if we explicitly pass in a file, I would expect that to be first, and then environment variables after that. But in any case, it's making sure we have it written down somewhere, and it's obvious, maybe even in the CLI, in the help text.
Agreed on documentation. I think the notion of explicit parameters trump environment variables is it's fairly well established. But but at the same time, open to ideas. But I agree that your overall theme on whatever it is, let's document it. And AJ's got a PR to some extent. That's good, at least. Unblock have a section for at least documenting variables, which is a good start. Do we skip intros, by the way?
Now we can go back to intros if you want.
David?
Hello, David.
Hi. Long time.
Hey guys. Yeah, no doubt.
Not to put you on the spot, but
Sorry, Dave Shepard. I'm with Capital One, and I have a small team of folks that work on custodian stuff.
awesome. Welcome.
Doesn't everybody work on cloud custodian?
Never enough. Actually, today is my 1-year anniversary of joining Cloud Custodian. So
Wow.
yeah, we're celebrating today. All right. Anything else left on 7465? All right, and then I'll post a link to the video notes. Hopefully, I know that's not a native English speaker, but hopefully that might help move the conversation and the PR forward. All right, with that, that's the last PR that's been marked for discussion. Darren, I hope did you get your sharing working?
Yeah, I think
All
my,
right.
I think I can share my screen now. Just check.
All right, let's do it.
Is it working?
Yep. Real quick, David, I'm just going to put the URL to the notes in the chat there if you want to follow along.
So yeah, let me set up the context on the issue that we run into here,
Mhm.
that we submit the PR for. This is for config poll rule mode. The problem is, so the policy will run, it will identify certain resources as non-compliant, as you can see here, right? And we submit it to AWS config. The problem is, suppose the user then decide, oh, okay, I don't want to fix the resource. I'm just gonna go ahead and delete the resource, the bad resource. And then the next time the policy runs, it just doesn't do anything. It doesn't do any cleanup, because all it does here, it looks basically we're doing a list of all the resources and then determine if they are bad or good, and then submit the evaluation. But it doesn't handle the fact that resources are now gone. This is not an issue with the event-based rule 1, which is config rule, where we actually
Config automatically cleans it up. In this
not
context.
exactly. So there's 2 lists in config. That's the main list under the resources tab, and then there's also the list of the resources under the config rule. The main list gets cleaned up automatically, but the list inside the config rule, it doesn't get cleaned up automatically. So here we actually have code where we check that the event is coming from a resource that's being deleted, or I think event left scope. Then we explicitly send an evaluation, say the rule does not apply anymore for this resource since it has been deleted.
So to resolve this, is this an existing PR? Maybe I haven't seen it yet already, but for config poll rule mode to do out of band deletion of the resource, and for us to clean up our evaluation, It would
Yes.
generally mean the next time we evaluate, we have to pull all the evaluations against that resource
Yeah,
type.
so that's where I
do
want
the
to.
delta sync.
Yeah.
Per
So
se.
that's what I want to discuss right now to see what is the best approach. The PR that was submitted.
I just
My
put it in 7,500.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Yep.
yeah, my team member. This is what he does. He before submitting the evaluation, he does a delete of all evaluations on that config rule. So basically doing a cleanup. My comment for him was that this seems a little bit heavy-handed, in my opinion. And it also introduced the fact that, hey, actually, let's open up the code here. View file.
It also doesn't work.
Oh, it does work. But my concern is, what happens
How would you,
if we do
you're,
this?
if you're doing an evaluation of a resource that's deleted, you won't even see the resource to post the deletion first.
And I think that's it, that it wouldn't, if you're doing a poll, then it would only show active resources and then it would show compliant or not compliant based on that. So
Yes.
the delete, it I think like Darren's saying, it does feel heavy handed. It seems like it'd work, but you're
Yeah.
thinking we'll do like a differential instead? Like
Oh,
some-
you mean to delete all the results of this
Yeah.
policy?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
You delete
Okay.
all the result, and then it submit whatever the existing code is after. It would then put evaluation for whatever is currently out there for non-compliant and compliant. So yeah, for me, this is a little bit too heavy-handed. And it also introduced a case of, hey, what happened if, let's say we delete this, and then when we try to do the put down here, let's say this fell for some reason, and now all of a sudden we're in a bad state.
Yeah, we also lose the historical context of how long it's been non-compliant, I guess, in that context as well. Because we've deleted the evaluation results and we've deleted the history out of config in that context.
Yeah.
The alternative is also potentially unbounded from a work perspective, in the context of if we have to pull all the evaluation results from this resource to determine what's the active set, then say we're doing a config poll against EBS snapshots or some high cardinality resource, we have to pull all the results down, but that's generally the right thing to do.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'd rather deal with the high cardinality scenario as it comes out, but pulling all the existing evaluation results, figuring out which resources in the set we didn't actually see, and going ahead and following, deleting the individual results seems like the right thing. So it's
Yeah.
sort of a delta sync.
Yep. So that's what this. I haven't submitted this PR. That's why I wanted to share my screen here. So this is, I think, is a better approach. Is instead of doing the heavy-handed solution of just wiping out all of the evaluation for that config rule, this will try to figure out what it actually needs to clean up. And to do that, we can make this call right here. This API call, get compliance detail by config rule. So we only need to look up the evaluations that specifically belong to this config rule that we are evaluating here. And then from there, we can compare this list, what resources it currently have, with the new list, and then we can figure out what needs to be deleted, to be removed.
Yeah. This makes sense. I think we probably need to paginate here.
Yeah. This is
but
old code that I need to use
no
paginator
worries.
instead of doing
No
this.
worries. I think we just want to sort of keep the arms of the resources we are processing as a set, and then when we pull the current evaluations, we're able to intersect that list and then do the deletions against it. So we just need the resource arms in that context from the evaluations.
Not sure what that means.
So when we go to process we go to do a poll rule mode, we basically fetch all the resources, we evaluate them, we do compliant, non-compliant. As we do that, we can build up a list of arms for those resources, or have that as a set. And then when we go to fetch the old results, we just build up a resource set. Sorry, I guess that's the question. Can we delete evaluations by ARN, or do we need the evaluation IDs?
We need these things right here, compliant resource ID.
Okay.
So that's what
resource
this code
ID
is
there
doing.
should be the yarn, right? The config generally uses the yarn as the ID, or I have security up. Okay. Can we implicitly use the finding filter, which probably already has the pagination and all that junk built into
Finding
it?
filter is security hub, which doesn't necessarily apply to config underlying.
Oh yeah, I'm mushing the two together. You're right. But do we have a?
We do have a compliance.
Config compliance. That's the filter I'm
Yes.
talking about. Like, could we call out to that rather than re-implementing?
It's a little different than that because config compliance is doing per resource API calls. In this case, the containing set that we're bounding scoping to is the rule itself.
Okay.
Yeah, because like the config compliance is designed to go against arbitrary rules, let's say, and in this case, we just want to grab the set for the rule, the policy that we're executing in. But Darren, it sounds good.
Cool.
Like I think the approach is sound.
Yeah,
We can go
okay.
through on code
Yep.
review, but like sounds good.
So yeah, I'll go ahead and tell my team member to update using this approach instead, and yeah, we'll clean up the code. That's it. And then outside of this PR, I think I have another PR follow-up on this one. Cider support for list of cider. I
Bring 'em on in this
believe
one.
the follow-up item was for Kapil to reach out to.
Sorry, been traveling this week and I did not get to this to talk to Austin.
Does anybody else know him? I can maybe like try to reach him on LinkedIn or something.
Sunny and Patricia,
I
I
can
believe, no.
talk to Austin. But what exactly needs to happen in this PR?
We want to resurrect this PR, and I think it's missing
CLA.
a CLA
Okay,
on
got
the
it.
current thing. And
Yeah.
just
I can probably talk to him today.
Oh, that'd be
Thank you.
amazing. Thank you.
Someday this PR isn't going to be in the discussion list, and we're not going to know what to do.
If we celebrate the birthday of this PR, it would be not good. All right. Anything else, Darren, while you have the screen share up?
No, that's it for me.
I think there were some other folks from your org that were doing some network stuff, network route filters, maybe. Is that, or maybe that's a different group. I don't know. Perhaps it was a different group. But the subnet filter, it was like public subnets and cross AZ nets. The subnet route stuff is now merged via different implementation, and I think we're waiting on the cross AZ NAT routes to be resurrected. It could also be mistaken as far as group identities, organization identities. All right, heading back to you, George.
Maybe not.
Oh, okay. All right.
George, I do have. It looks like so we've gone through the booms, right? We've covered the booms.
Yeah, we can add more booms. Or we
All
can
right. Yeah,
add-
I was going to potentially add one boom only because Stephen, I see you on the call, and I know that you had reported that one about the C7.
I rebuilt like 25 Dockers in the last 2 days.
I know.
Thank you.
I saw you.
It's working, so it's definitely it works.
Which one is it?
The one that was
74,
crashing C7 in org when it hit.
There we go.
A locked
Yeah.
account.
Oh, you said you rebuilt including this change and it was working for you?
Yes, yeah. I'm running.
Oh,
it.
good. That's
Yeah,
a
it's
good
working.
signal. Cool.
I mean, at least I haven't noticed it. There's a lot of accounts, but yeah, what happened is we have acquisitions that have accounts that they don't want to shut them off, so they just lock them out. So when C7N gets to them, it just bombed. Then
Yeah, and I think Kapil had identified the issue here. So it was I think
Hmm.
we were having a different issue a while back. People were running C7N org against all regions, and there were differences across accounts with the way that we had opt-in regions. So
Yeah,
we
you lock a
resolve
region,
that
yeah.
per account.
same
We
thing.
made that change. It broke this case where you've got a C7N org file that has accounts that don't work, where you've lost the access.
Yes,
So,
thank
yeah,
you. Thank you very much.
Should be cool now.
Yeah, it's working.
Nice. Well,
Yeah,
thanks
I
for
was
testing.
putting little exceptions in all the Docker files to go back to an old version of C7 org.
Yeah, it's not fun.
Now I can go latest.
All right, so that was a good boom.
Yeah.
One. Oh, sorry. One topic was around the GCP periodic stuff. So long story short, seems like the GCP periodic mode has bit rotted to some extent with some changes that were in place on the GCP side of things. So if anyone
to be clear, GCP did a default break of all functions. So
right,
to be fair,
yeah, yeah. Just so for anyone that's looking into using that, I have a PR up that addresses some of that. But the main one of the main points on that one is the addition of a required field for service account, which will be a breaking schema change going forward. So whenever that PR goes in, probably need a larger version bump than the minor one that we're doing right now.
Given that it's, well, I don't know, because it's already broken, right? Like the service provider changed the API or changed the default behavior underneath the hood. So it was already broken. So I don't, like, if we require a new field per schema, just because it wasn't required before doesn't mean it was actually working in the EDE. So I don't know that I would necessarily consider that a breaking change on our part. We're just fixing something that was broken due to a provider switching out, becoming broken, breaking compatibility themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it either way. Like in practice, it's not really like you said, it's not really breaking because it's already broken. But
it's not. I mean, it's not breaking because it's already broken, and we weren't the cause of the breakage per se. In that context.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, other than the fact that I don't think we've seen any noise on that, other than the one.
I think there's a GitHub issue somewhere around it. At least one.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's like you referenced it with
well,
6280.
yeah, hopefully we can get that resolved. The other question was, there's a bunch of other cloud function based modes as well. I took a quick look. It doesn't seem like the PubSub sync ones are affected. But I don't know if anyone else has any other context on the other modes for me to look at.
So what, we have 3 modes there? I mean, almost everything is PubSub based underneath the hood at some point, with the exception of HTTP trigger, which is the periodic motion. Now, it's also worthwhile noting that periodic also supports event, also like isn't broken per se if you're using PubSub for it, because periodic HTTP periodic supports both HTTP trigger as well as PubSub trigger. The event modes should be fine because those are PubSub based. Which additional mode are you referencing, like Cloud Security Command Center, or that's more of an action?
Yeah, I saw that there's the PubSub event one. There's the GCP audit one and periodic.
GCP audit should be fine because that's effectively PubSub based underneath the hood. And there's a GCP is also, I'm not sure how to describe it, has layered vocabulary on top of PubSub in the form of event arc, but that would be a new execution mode per se. I think this is really just specific to periodic with HTTP trigger.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, that makes it easier then. Cool.
And that's it. That's PR 7498. I marked it in the notes. All right. Anything else?
I do
All
have
right.
I do have a
Oh.
question for Kapil, since Kapil mentioned that he's at FinOps, some FinOps conference.
I did see some folks from Intuit here.
Was that?
I
Oh
did
yeah,
see some
Jason.
folks from
Is it Jason Road?
it was a woman.
Oh,
yeah.
woman.
Yeah.
Then. Okay. Well, the reason I brought it up is because right now we are using Cloud Custodian, but the much older version of Cloud Custodian for some of the what we call cost optimization. I would say data gathering. I would say we kind of misusing Cloud Custodian. We have custom code, as you know, we're trying to migrate away from it. But in the custom code, we have a lot of custom code that collects data, which we would then use for what we call weight sensor to determine, okay, these things are not best configured. And then from there, we then generate reports on how to better optimize our usage of cloud resources. So I'm just curious, do you have any plan or vision on what does Cloud Custodian do in the realms of cost optimization beyond what is currently supported right now?
So right now, like if I look at the FinOps matrix, we're doing governance, we're doing resource utilization, we're doing policy enforcement. I gave a lightning talk, and there's a there's a working group around automation in FinOps. I also led a talk on that. A lot of what we do is to allow you to take a cost policy that is not amenable to was it Fin DevOps, I think they call it, where it's something that you can do sort of pipeline based, where it's and the interesting part around FinOps in general is that a lot of it is utilization based, which requires history, which requires deployment, which is evaluating what's already in the environment in that context. So I mean, where does Custodian excel? There's a new phrase I heard yesterday: zombie resources. So we're great at figuring out zombie resources. We're great at figuring out underutilized resources. We're great at implementing policies around, getting rid of instance type modernization or switching out to ARM, or workloads in this environment should be spot based. And so we help do some of the enforcement on policies per se there. There's a lot of other things in FinOps per se, from forecasting. I'd like to see some additional growth into budget alert setting. But from a roadmap perspective, it's open-ended right now. The working group, the automation working group in FinOps Foundation is really just defining a set of vendor-neutral use cases that should be automated. And as that list gets compiled, I think we'll try to tackle them as first-class use cases within Custodian itself, as long as they're not like workout unit economics, which it's an interesting group because it's a mix of finance and dev. And so when they started talking about that, I'm like, I don't understand. Please explain. It's really just a very business specific unit metric to understand what your cost is for delivery of service per se on whatever your good to be sold is. I think Pearson gave an example of delivering a course online. What's the cost of doing that per se? Now we wouldn't per se play in some of that space, but I think anything around the infrastructure space where it makes sense, like say we automatically create budget alerts for everything that has a resource group, let's say, there's potentially value there. And so, open to, I think around a lot of the automation use cases around resource extent in the environment, we can play very well and be helpful for organizations as far as new capabilities, open suggestions. And, if you could classify some of the extensions that were already done, it'd be nice to maybe just follow a set of GitHub issues, and we can add a new tag for FinOps per se, to make those classified, so we can have a separate roadmap per se on FinOps use cases.
Yeah, from our side, like I said, the what we have been doing mostly is we're using Cloud Custodian to detect things and then send data. Like you said, historical data, we need to be able to then keep track, and then from there on, we then do additional things based on the collected data. But yeah, I'm just curious as to if Cloud Custodian can do some of that things too, rather than just using it for collecting.
I think we absolutely do. I think, you know, a lot of the utility is around metrics filters now. If we have to maintain a separate data store, that's potentially problematic, because that speaks to potentially different use cases. So I think we just want to collect the use cases, which is what the working group is doing today. If there's when I led the chalkboard, I encourage everyone who was there, because there were lots of people doing lots of different things, from RI rebalancing across, you know, subscriptions, or into like reserve instance purchases, rebalancing to lots of different use cases. So definitely want to try to support that. I think there's a open question on what are the use cases that we don't do today that are in our wheelhouse, but also being respectful of the fact there are some use cases that are not in our wheelhouse, and not drawing the line there as far as like you're talking about anomaly detection or forecasting, or we're probably going to wave off to other tools in that context.
I'm in FinOps in my company, and all our dashboards are fed by outputs from Cloud Custodian, mixed with COR and Cloudability, unfortunately. And but yeah, so we use it.
Cloudability is also the original creator of the
know,
FinOps Foundation.
I know. I'm
also
cool with
respect for them
Cloudability.
creating
I'm not so much happy with Aptio, whatever they call them. But yeah, so we use them for we gamify across our divisions compliance using Cloud Custodian outputs for like underutilization. Now we're using it for sustainability as well. But yeah, there's some cool things I've thought of, you know, that could go well in Cloud Custodian, like the API stuff that calls the offerings, the big giant catalog like EC2 or whatever from AWS. It'd be kind of cool if we could somehow merge that, because right now I write code that just mixes it all together. But like,
sorry,
maybe
which data set were you referencing?
the offerings from the AWS API, the one that has like the price codes and everything.
Okay.
So it would be cool, like if my output from Cloud Custodian could like show like a on-demand price or something, you know, something raw that I could.
Yeah, I mean, on-demand price, like the raw price book from AWS.
Yeah, not the
roughly
stuff that's
3
been
gigabytes.
Reserve savings plan and all that crap. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's potentially some ability for us to do like it might be interesting to explore. Like I've looked at some other tools in the space, like Interpolation, which does have a pricing API endpoint, but there is the raw data for the price books is ginormous.
It's huge. It's just one page and
also list. It's not, you know, it's not actual as well.
Yeah.
You know, how do you certify it in the airplane? Ask the person next to you how much they pay for the ticket. Yeah. Same thing with cloud per se. And unfortunately, on the discount for larger organizations, it's applied. It's a end of month post bill sort of application, and so you have this like weird retro effect. But I think there is definitely value per se in what you're referencing, which is like, hey, I don't care about that. I just want the list price.
Yeah, just to compare, like, you know.
It's just a question of whether or not that would be an external service. Would that be an external data set that's normalized and queryable? Does that have to be like, is that something that's easily deployed, so to speak, in without relying on SaaS of some form, or even a shared S3 bucket, because that creates risk on deployments per se. So definitely open to it. Just trying to figure out what the way to do it is that is resilient and respectful for organizations that you know are deployed in GovCloud or some environment where they do have sensitivity to some of these data pools.
Yeah. But yeah, like I said, yeah, we use it for the Graviton or ARM transition. That's huge, and that's all coming from Cloud Custodian.
I mean, if you have a specific set of use cases that you'd like to see beyond, like I think what I heard there was pricing.
Yeah, what I do now is I just pull that stuff separate, API, jam it into like SQLite, and then cross everything. But you could do it all in one YAML, you know, that would be really cool.
I mean, it
Yeah.
might be worth opening up a discussion just to brainstorm on this topic as well, just to like see what are the different things we can do. Because we get into there's region-specific pricing, there's the inside price or the configuration pricing, then there's usage pricing, so to speak. And usage pricing for us would be matching up to a metrics filter. Like it gets. I probably think we would just restrict ourselves to inherent provisioning pricing, like EC2 instance type, let's say, or and of course then this capability. So like then you could do a cost filter. The other option here is doing something with Cost Explorer and
or
API.
Athena and the CUR.
You said Athena.
Then the Athena, specific to the company, to the account. So maybe Custodian could create a Athena table off the CUR and then converge the data between the output of Custodian and the CUR for that particular company. And then you're all one data source, right? You're not.
Yeah, except like on the CLI, there is no data set, right? Like if you just upgrade or change how you config, like you don't have to worry about state in the same way. As soon as we adopt state stores, like that's a different. I'm not saying no. I'm just saying like it's something which should be carefully considered because it changes a lot. It has a lot of implications downstream for end users. Yeah, the closest thing we get to doing a stateful operation over multiple steps is encrypting EBS volumes on EC2. In this case, it would be like a long-running data store external, which would be potentially interesting, but definitely something to do cautiously as far as how do we approach it. I would probably say like there are dedicated tools around CUR stuff. Like in this context, I would be looking at what fits in our wheelhouse is more like, hey, let's use the Cost Explorer API to go and do an intersection against this resource tag or something per se. I think a first good start approximation might be trying like that would get us into the space might be looking at setting up budget alerts per se. I think it's still an open question of how you configure them for different groups, but might be like if they don't have one, set a default of this value, so to speak, and source additional values from S3. But beyond that, I think potentially looking at Cost Explorer, we already have we called it reduce, probably should have been a group back filter that lets us sort of get aggregate sets, and adding a cost dimension to that might be interesting as well.
There's also the sustainability. I don't know if you've seen it. AWS put out some kind of crazy carbon tool. It's not real good because it doesn't take in your resources or tags or anything like that, so you can't break it out into anything. It's kind of like an overall green thing. But maybe that has future of like Cost Explorer, but Green Explorer or something. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a separate sustainability working group as well within FinOps. But I mean, yeah, I know there's a couple of different tools that AWS has been more on the solution space, I think, than product space. Let's say, has been putting out there. It's definitely game to explore and see where we can go, and I just want to make sure if we are going to take on the state store that we are mindful of how we message that, because it changes some of the operational aspects if you use that particular capability, and it would be different than other filters and other capabilities per se. So just how do we message that cleanly?
Yeah.
I mean, in GCP, everyone
reduce filter.
I just go ahead.
The reduce filter, you're thinking like we can say just show me the 10% most expensive resources or something by raw cost.
Well, so if we're doing so if we do the group thing, if we are able to get an aggregation and it's say by tag, then there's definitely a capability to use Cost Explorer to add in an additional, I guess, having clause, to use a SQL analogy, on the group by, where we use cost as the filter per se. Like, show me all my applications that are spending more than $10,000 or something.
Okay, that way. Cool.
All right. Anything else? All right. We'll give everyone 2 minutes back. AJ, are we hanging out and doing a release?
People want to hang out and do a release? That sounds like good fun.
Yeah.
We can keep the recording rolling. You can all, yeah, like I said, poke holes in anything or
actually,
or laugh if things go off the rails.
Yeah, I'll stop the recording and I'll start a new one so we have them both on YouTube separately. And then that way
Sounds
people
good.
can consume what they want. All right, with that, everyone see everyone else in 2 weeks. If you're hanging out, feel free to hang out.
Thanks, all. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
I'm gonna get lunch, so I'll see you guys later. Cheers.
Cheers.
Have fun.
All right, recording stopped. Recording stopped. There we go.